Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The creation of the first atomic bomb was known as the Manhattan Project. The project involved superpower countries, renowned characters, and distinguished scientists, all united with two main purposes: to create the bomb before the Nazis and end World War II. Yet the Manhattan Project also inadvertently influenced many other factors, such as science and society, in ways that still impact us today. At the time the Manhattan Project was developed, World War II had many people worried. The Nazi scientific team had found a way to split the uranium atom, which produces the energy necessary to create a weapon of mass destruction. This threatened the entire world, for the Nazis were one step ahead of everyone else. An Italian scientist known as Enrico Fermi had also managed to produce an atomic fission in 1934. Years later, in 1939, the brilliant scientist and theorist known as Albert Einstein wrote a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt that proposed the initiation of the Manhattan Project. This led to the first meeting of the Uranium Committee on October 21st of that same year, where Vannevar Bush was assigned as the lead scientist. Later, Fermi joined the committee and the unimaginable task began. Throughout 1940, the committee and other teams that had joined the project looked for elements that could sustain an atomic fission. Eventually, scientist Glenn T. Seaberg discovered plutonium. This new element was fissionable, but details about its reaction were light years away from the progress done to uranium. Therefore, the teams decided to create their atomic bomb based on uranium. Desperate to find the perfect bomb ingredient after much trial and error, the group of scientists led by Enrico Fermi searched for the best possible element. That element was uranium-235, a variation of uranium. Uranium-235 is almost always mixed with uranium-238, so the teams had to look for ways to obtain U-235 from U-238. Isotopes are atoms belonging to the same element. 4 ways of separating isotopes exist. During the project, scientists tried 3 methods. The most efficient method was the centrifuge. In a sealed chamber, particles of UF6, a compound used in the uranium enrichment process, were shot with abundant pressure into 2 different funnels, one having a larger vacuum than the other. Particles that are more dense were attracted to the funnel with the larger vacuum, while the less dense particles were attracted to the shorter vacuum. The scientists produced a total of 64 kilograms. On June 22, 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union and took possessions over its laboratories and equipment, which forced the Allied forces to decide whether the bomb could be made or not. On October 9, 1941, Vannevar Bush communicated to President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Vice President Henry A. Wallace that the making of the atomic bomb was feasible. Roosevelt then agreed to the creation of the bomb, granting aid from the Army, if needed, and plenty of financial support. Without warning, Japan attacked the naval base of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. 2,403 Marines were killed and many others were wounded.
December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
In May of 1942, after Pearl Harbor, J. Robert Oppenheimer was appointed the new head of the project. His impressive work and leadership skills earned him a distinguished reputation as a true scientist and intellectual. Mark Walker teaches nuclear history at the Union College in New York. He received a PhD from Princeton University, and he's the author of Nazi Science, Myth, Truth, and the German Atomic Bomb.
And so between January and June of 1942, that's half a year. In January 42, the Americans and Germans were pretty much tied as far as working on an atomic bomb. And by June of 1942, the Americans were way in front. By June of 42, the Americans got as far as the Germans did by the end of the war. And then, of course, the Americans continued working after June of 42.
In April 1943, the work for designing the bombs, codenamed Y-12 and X-10, began in Los Alamos, New Mexico. At the same time, the plutonium bomb was also being developed in another facility known as Oak Ridge. On July 16, 1944 at 5:30 a.m., the first bombs were tested in Los Alamos Trinity site. Two types of bombs were detonated in this site, one being composed of uranium-235 and another plutonium-232. After the testings, only the uranium bomb detonated properly, while the plutonium bomb was eventually improved and codenamed K-25. Meanwhile, the Nazi powers in Europe surrendered on May 7, 1945. The Japanese were the only nation that had not surrendered. On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was firebombed with Y-12, nicknamed Little Boy, resulting in 66,000 casualties. Then, Japan was bombed once again in Nagasaki with bomb X-10, nicknamed Fat Man, resulting in 39,000 casualties. The bomb's main purpose was to end the war, and they did end the war, but many lives were lost during this process. Japan then surrendered on September 2, 1945, after the bombings, marking the official end of World War II. The decision to drop the first atomic bomb continues to be widely debated. However, according to historian J. Samuel Walker, there are four arguable reasons. The first reason dates back to December 7, 1941, when Japan abruptly attacked the naval base of Pearl Harbor located in Hawaii. The next reason that the bombs were detonated lies in all the efforts and investments placed in the bombs. An estimate of $1,889,604,000 was spent by the end of 1945. It took the aid of thousands of engineers and officials and a vast amount of resources. The third reason was the fact that the Americans wanted to impress the Soviet Union, with the purpose to approach the Soviets and threaten their control in Eastern Europe. The last and most questioned reason for the usage of the bombs was that people and those who contributed to the making of the weapon longed for its usage. So much energy had been placed into these bombs that the United States was not going to suddenly abandon all of their efforts. One aspect that has affected the perspective of the Manhattan Project is the profound fear people had of an atomic bomb. Many historians believe that the government of the United States itself unintentionally planted the seed of fear society had of the bombings. The government advertised positive factors of the bombs, yet hid the negative impacts such as the atrocious effects of radiation. But why does it matter to people in the 21st century? How does the story of the creation of a feared weapon affect history, and more specifically, us? The Manhattan Project had both positive and negative impacts throughout history. At first, it seemed like a negative twist, but it actually provided the world with many positive advancements, such as discovering a new and more eco-friendly way to generate energy, known as nuclear energy. Another advancement is how it brought people together and allowed a number of ideas to flow through different minds, a lot of which we continue to hear today. The Manhattan Project allowed the exchange of scientific ideas, theories, and experiments, the encounter of a new perspective of science, warfare, and weaponry, the exploration of a nuclear weapon that changed the course of history. It all started with a highly exclusive, top-secret idea. The intention of this idea was to end war and save lives, yet it was converted into a method of revenge that ended up introducing a new age of fear and killing thousands. The Manhattan Project, more than just an explosion.